What's going on, everybody? My name is Michael Weer, and it is Friday, so that means we are doing a Friday the 13th review. In fact, we are doing the final Friday the 13th, the last, not like the final Friday, the actual last Friday the 13th that was made. This will conclude our Friday the 13th series that we've been doing every weekend for the past 10 weeks. Now this is the 11th. Yeah, because there's 11 Friday the 13th. Guys, I'm so excited to do this review with you, and I'm excited because I say it's the last one, but now they've announced that next year we will get a Friday the 13th movie. And notoriously, these movies release on Friday the 13th, and it's not in production yet, and it's already September, and there's only 2 Friday the 13th next year. The first one is in January. So I bet we'll get some concept art or we'll get an announcement official in January like, hey, Friday the 13th, because the second Friday the 13th in 2023 is in October. That's right, October the 13th. Dude, that is so cool. I can't believe, like, they're setting it up perfectly. I have wanted a Friday the 13th ever since this reboot that we're about to talk about. So without delay, let's talk about the last Friday the 13th that has been made so far.
Jason! His name was Jason, and today is his birthday.
And so, guys, Friday the 13th was rebooted in 2009. Now, as a fan of the series and a fan of the franchise, I was actually happy that it got a hard reboot because it was time. Honestly, it was time after part 6. I didn't like 7, 8, 9, and at 10, as much as I like the campiness of it and I like Jason in space because of the implications, I understood that it was time to say none of those ever happened. Here we go. Now, they've done a new thing in Hollywood recently where they're like, oh, the first movie happened, and now this movie, 20, 30, 40 years later. However, I like the idea of a hard reboot on this franchise to just completely clean the slate for Jason and say, let's move on. The movie is directed by Marcus Nispel. Now, Marcus also directed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot in 2005. A movie that also rebooted an entire series and acted like it hadn't happened before. It has other similarities as well, too, I'll touch on real quick. The first thing is the movie just knows what it is and it goes for it. It doesn't waste a lot of time. Immediately, you understand what this movie is doing and what the end game is going to be, which I appreciate. They don't dilly-dally. They don't sit there and give you a bunch of lore. Like, immediately, it gets into it. And we'll talk about the synopsis of this movie in a second. But the other similarity, the thing I like the most about this movie, and it will be in my likes later, is Jason is threatening. Like, he is a massive dude, and it was an early 2000s trend. You saw it in Rob Zombie's Halloween, and you also saw it in Texas Chainsaw. The characters are now these big hulking monsters instead of like just regular dudes, which I always had a problem with in those older movies, just these regular dudes. Now, Leatherface technically in the original, he's a big guy, but he's just kind of fat, whereas in the remake from 2005, he's this big hulk of a dude. And like I said, Rob Zombie continued that with Michael Myers, and I love that version of Michael Myers, and I love the 2009 version of Jason. He's this big, massive dude. So I appreciate what the director did there. He kind of took the horror slasher genre and then also made it threatening, if that makes sense. Well, let's get into the synopsis of this movie. So Friday the 13th, this movie is basically the first 4 movies in the franchise just pushed into one movie, which I'm good with because I like that it stays true to the original 4 movies, like the source material. In fact, the entire first movie is done in the first opening scene, which I really like. They do it in black and white. It's actually a really cool shot in there. So you got Jason's mom, just like in the end of the first movie, going after the final girl, and she's saying, you guys killed my boy, just like in the first movie, and her head gets cut off. But right when her head gets cut off, it is a brilliant shot. I really love it. Her head gets cut off, it's all black and white, and as she swings to cut her head off, it flashes to color. And then it goes right back to black and white. You'll miss it. It's like 2 seconds, but it is an incredible shot, and just, I love how beautiful that shot was. That ends the first scene, and then we get into what you think is going to be the main characters of this movie. You've got 5 people who are traveling, hiking into a wood area. As it turns out, it's Camp Crystal Lake, but they're not 100% sure, and they even make reference to that. They're like, isn't Camp Crystal Lake where all those murders happened so long ago? And they're like, listen, you know how many crystal lakes they are? And that was a great point. I liked that. Like, every bottled water says it comes from a crystal lake, so who cares? And I was like, that's a good point. So they're out there in the woods, and the reason they're out there is they're looking for marijuana plants. They hear that there's a bunch around there, so they're going to gather what they can, and then their plan is to sell it from there. So they get out there. Of course, it's nighttime. They're like, hey, let's camp here for the night. And as soon as they said that, I was like, uh-oh, it's too early in the movie. This is not going to end well. And sure enough, it doesn't, because as soon as they all split up, you've got two of them that go off into the woods and they're kind of just like exploring, and they find Jason's house. And then you've got two of them that go into a tent to do adult things. And then you've got the last one, who's the nerdy guy, who goes out into the woods and actually finds the marijuana plants. And when he finds them, he's like, oh, I found the pot. And he looks up and Jason's there and just gets, gutted. It's awesome. So from there, Jason goes on a tear. And when I say Jason goes on a tear, I mean I have never seen brutality in a Friday the 13th movie at this level. It is awesome. Talking about the sleeping bag kill that we've seen in these movies before, he takes it to the next level. Like this movie, the kills are all at the next level, which I love. But he takes this one chick and puts her in a sleeping bag over a fire, and she just burns to death because she's like toasting in there. And then you've got everybody else. You got one guy gets stuck in a bear trap, and you get the other two. One gets pulled through a floor. It's just a brutal opening scene. But as these people are getting killed off, you realize, oh shoot, none of these people are people I'm going to follow the rest of the movie. So as that scene comes to a close, you see Jason grab the last girl he hasn't killed yet, and it cuts out and says Friday the 13th. And it's just an absolutely awesome scene that goes so hard. Then we move on to the actual main characters of this movie. You've got a group of party-going young adults who are going to go to Camp Crystal Lake to party, because that's what you do in a Friday the 13th movie. And as much as that usually bothers me, since this is technically the first movie in the series and none of the kills from the opening act are known, it kind of works for me, because I'm like, all right, well, they don't know it's this savage, murderous place. So I'm good with that. And the other main character of this movie is played by Jared Padalecki, famous from Supernatural. Now, Jared Padalecki is the brother to the girl that Jason grabbed at the opening title scene, and he's looking for her. But he's not getting a lot of help from the town people, though. He's getting bad vibes from everybody. He can't figure it out. And he does stumble across the group of partygoers at one point, and the main one, who's just like the biggest dickhead in the world, is rude to him, doesn't care, and they all go their merry ways. For now. And again, the thing that I said I really loved about this movie at the beginning is that this movie just goes for it. So there's not a lot more setup or synopsis I can give you, because at this point, I've already told you, you've got all these characters in Camp Crystal Lake, you got several there to party, you got one there looking for his sister, you got a girl who's been taken by Jason, and then you've got Jason himself. Those are your main characters. And from there, it's a Friday the 13th movie that is just excellent kill after excellent kill after excellent kill until it gets to the brutal end. And I loved the brutal end of this movie, my God. But since I'm talking about things I like, let's get into the things I like and the one thing I dislike. So I've already said that I liked how Jason looks in this movie, but I also like the progression of Jason in this movie. He actually starts as Baghead Jason, which is Jason from part 2. And then in the end of part 2, he gets the bag taken away, and in part 3, he finds the mask. So in this movie, he starts as Baghead Jason for that opening act, and he goes into a tool shed where he kills this guy just brutally. But then as he goes to take his bag and put it back on his face because he got ripped off, he looks and he notices there's a hockey mask on the floor, and he puts that hockey mask on for the first time, and it's just a great scene. Like, it's done really well. And I like how that kind of sped up the fact we didn't need to spend an entire movie with Jason with a bag on his head. We already have him in the hockey mask. The acting is the next thing that I really like about this movie. Look, when you say a Friday the 13th movie has good actors in it, that's a big deal, because the majority of these movies do not have good actors and actresses in them. But I feel like this movie really does. It's something that was focused on in this movie, and it's noticeable throughout. Like, not only do you get Jared Padalecki, who is probably the most famous, but even the main dickhead in the movie, and I can't think of his name, even him, he's a great dickhead actor. Like, he was the same bad guy from Transformers 1 who was pushing Shia LaBeouf around. Like, he plays a good bully, and I think he's also in Accepted. Yeah, same guy. Same guy who's like a dickhead in that movie. So I really like that that guy found his niche in Hollywood for a couple of years. I don't know what happened to him, but whatever. It works for this movie. And it works for the other characters too. Everybody kind of fits into their personal role in this movie really well. Again, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I will say, again, what I love is the kills in this movie. They are so good throughout the entire movie, including one I really liked, where you've got this kid who's like, I'm the fastest man alive, don't worry about me. If I get around him, don't worry, I'll be fast. And he is fast. And at one point he does square up with Jason, and he manages to escape Jason and take off running. And you're like, oh, he's probably going to make it. He is fast. And Jason pulls out this axe, and he takes his axe and just whips it over his head. It flies through the air and just right into his back. It is a great scene. And that's the thing too. The weapon use in this movie is so great. You do have Jason using arrows. You do have Jason using an axe. You have Jason using using his machete. You have Jason using all these different, a screwdriver at one point, just all these different things. Whatever Jason can get his hands on, he uses. And I like that because he uses different weapons throughout the first 4 movies. And in this movie, they understand that. He's not just this machete wielding, okay, and the machete is officially his thing. No, in this movie, he does use a machete and he uses it well. But throughout the movie, whatever is around, he will use to kill people. And it's just done so well. I guess if we get into a negative I have for this movie, it's the tool shed guy. He's like this mechanic that kind of live. It's a weird aspect of this movie, and they use him to plot device give Jason the hockey mask, which is fine. It's a little gripe I've got with this movie because, again, I think this movie is damn near perfect for a horror slasher movie. But the issue I have with his character and the sort of setup for his character is that he is actively living and working for a long time on that land. So why Jason is just now coming out and killing him, I'm not sure. Maybe it's the triggering events of the beginning of this movie. It very well could have been. Like maybe Jason was just pissed because these 5 people came onto his property and so now he's just killing everybody that's in the vicinity of Crystal Lake. But maybe. But even then, you'd think somebody would have stumbled upon him at some point and he would have killed everybody. So the fact that there's this mechanic tool shed guy that's a really weird character that lives on this property and smokes the weed that he finds in this property. So he's, again, in the same vicinity as Jason because that weed was right near the house where Jason was at. It just doesn't make a lot of sense why his character exists in the first place because he should have been killed a long time ago. But for whatever reason, he's just lived on the land. And Jason apparently didn't have a problem with him until the events of this movie. So again, unless the events of the first act forced Jason out of hiding and like forced him to just go on this tear, I don't really know. But again, it's a gripe because it does lead to the progression of the hockey mask and I like the scene as it is. So it's a gripe. But that's my only gripe. I really did love everything about this movie. This is almost a yearly rewatch for me. I don't think there's been many years recently where I haven't at least turned it on and enjoyed that opening scene once a year because it just goes so hard and the rest of the movie is great as well. I know we're done talking about things that I like and dislike, but I will say I love the way this movie concludes. And what I mean by that is that you've got Jason gets defeated because his head goes into a wood chipper, which is just brutal. And then they take him and they roll him off a dock into the lake. So they're like, let's get rid of him. But for whatever reason, Jason's got magic powers and he pops out of the lake, grabs the girl, and pulls her down. And it's just a great close to this movie. I know some people have a problem with the movie ending this way. They're like, nah, that's stupid. But it is like paying respect to the original movies because Jason was always jumping out of somewhere like, I'm still alive, bitch. Like, that's how those movies went. So if you look at this movie as sort of paying respect to those first 4 movies and using that source material, and it didn't end like that, it would have disappointed a lot of real fans. So in my opinion, I love the beginning of this movie. I think it's got a solid story throughout the movie, and I like how they ended it. And honestly, my biggest gripe and issue with this entire movie is that we never got a sequel because I feel like the characters involved with Jason and the actor that played that Jason, it all just worked perfectly for me. Now, maybe I'm in the minority, but it worked perfectly for me, and I wish we would have gotten more sequels, but it went into legal hell because there was a battle between the original creators and the studio, and it's been in legal hell since 2009, and now it's 2022. But like I said at the beginning of this video, it seems they've worked things out, and they're coming out with a new Friday the 13th. I expect it to be a hard reboot again. I don't expect it to be a sequel now. It'd be really weird, but I don't know what they're going to do, so I'm very curious to see how they're going to handle that. This has been an absolute blast talking about these Friday the 13th movies. If you guys have enjoyed this series, do me a favor and hit the like button on this video. Hit the share button on this video if you want your friends to see this. If you've seen Friday the 13th, the reboot from 2009, we'll put your thoughts and your comments in the comment section down below and let me know what you think about it. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you wish that it was more like the older films? I don't know. I just like how clean the movie is. It's very clean cut, straight to the point, and Jason is a badass. Like, you can't ask for much more out of these movies. And finally, guys, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure you do that because I got a lot of content coming your way, including next week, we start a brand new series review. All that said, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.